Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Jeff Lewis. I'm here with our managing partner, Eugene. Eugene, you and I have looked at a lot of websites together, and I wanted to take some time today to talk about the must-haves, for every Eyecare website.
Yeah, and I think if we start with the homepage, there's a lot of things that most people miss on a homepage. Uh, a perfect example is a call to action. When you think about it, what do you want people to do when they show up to your website? Well, you want them to request or book an appointment, and you want them to call you. So how prominent are those calls to action? Sometimes you'll see them right at the top, and then you kind of scroll, and then you don't see anything until the very end. What we like to say is you got to have calls to action above the fold, and there's always got to be a primary and a secondary. And the way you design those buttons, one button needs to be filled in, and the other button needs to just have an outline so that you kind of your eye and the consumer psychology kind of naturally knows what's the primary thing that you want someone to do, what's the secondary thing you want them to do. Another thing, as we're talking about calls to action, is a sticky navbar. So as you scroll down, the ability to navigate to different parts of the website should just stay in front of the consumer right at the top of the page, whether they're scrolling on their phone or they're scrolling on a desktop device. And then I think the other thing you have to think about is what is the patient experience on the website? And you really, you got to just get into the mindset of the consumer. And I see a lot of people write these really lengthy things, and somebody is just trying to figure out, is this the right provider for me as quickly as possible? So what's a good way to do that? Well, number one is when they get to your website, they should see people like themselves. They should see patients. They shouldn't necessarily see, pictures of doctors standing in suits and accolades. They should really be more of an experience that focuses on the patient. And then as they're scrolling down, give them easy to consume bite-sized chunks of content. Does that make sense, Jeff?
It does. It does. And so how do we know that these elements are necessary?
Yeah, and we have a little bit of an advantage here. Having built dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of websites in the eye care space, one of the cool things that we've learned is that how patients use websites and how specifically eye care patients use websites. And frequently, what that also means is that we've installed enough tracking codes on these websites. And this is where, again, another thing that a lot of people miss is a Google Tag Manager code. You just see people that have maybe basic analytics on their website and don't have Google Tag Manager. Well, if you don't have Google Tag Manager, you don't have the opportunity to find out which of your elements are converting and doing the conversion tracking. So did somebody click on this button or did somebody click on that button? And did somebody, to get to this appointment scheduler, did somebody click here first and then end up there? Or did they just show up there in the first place? And that kind of stuff, knowing the patient behavior on the eye care and typical eye care websites helps us be better resources for saying, hey, this is what a typical eye care patient needs to know in order to be able to do that. And of course, the way we know that is that we test it. We can test page one versus page two. We can also test the client one versus client two. But more importantly, we really want to set yourself up to where your website is always gathering information for you.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about testing. How does testing work?
Yeah, no, a great question, Jeff. It's really kind of like if you think about your website as more of a science experiment than just a flashy brochure. What's the purpose of the website? Well, it's to generate traffic for your practice, and it's also to convert that traffic. So generating traffic, you can get some pretty easy data from your SEO provider to say how much traffic is this website bringing on board. But without having to spend a single dollar on paid traffic, without having to spend a single dollar on search engine optimization, what you can do is you can basically make a set of science experiments on your website to say, all that traffic that comes in, how can I turn more of those visitors into real prospects or real patients in my practice? And the way you would do that is with A/B testing. So what you would do is you would set up some modules to where half the traffic goes to version 1 of the website, half the traffic goes to version 2. And when I'm thinking about A/B testing, I'm not talking about like a completely different redesign of the website. I'm thinking take one element, just move it around, or change the color, or change the presentation, or change the wording, and see what happens. Sometimes, Jeff, nothing happens. sometimes you get, the same exact conversions from version 1 as you do from version 2. But sometimes some really surprising things happen. You get some phenomenal results by just, moving, we've added some buttons to a Navbar where we moved it from, the third button over to the last button over. And all of a sudden we see conversion increase by 20, 30% without spending an extra dime on traffic. We got the same amount of traffic, but we got 20% more conversions from that page. And sometimes, you can move. We had a situation where we moved a video on a mobile rendering of the site from up here to down here, and people would pause at that video. We saw it on our heat maps, and what you would end up seeing is that the people who paused that video would convert higher. And again, that I guess the other point there is that you would get sometimes you get different results on mobile and on desktop from the same change. So whether you want the button to be yellow on mobile and green on green on desktop, that may be different results. In some cases, we've had results that increase conversion by 50% on desktop, but they actually decrease conversion on mobile. So as you're doing testing, you've got to remember that there's the AB version for desktop, and then there's AB version for mobile. And mobile, of course, is probably more than 50% of traffic for almost all eye care practices these days.
Wow, that's great. You mentioned video. Is that still important?
Oh yeah, Jeff. I mean the data has been overwhelmingly so for the past, I would say 3 or 4 years, that adding video to any website is definitely helpful in terms of both conversion and time on page. And we've seen some very substantial results. Just adding a short, and we practices say, oh, well, I don't have time to produce, an expensive $10,000 video production, whatever. It's not even that complicated. Just add a short, authentic looking video that allows you to create, that allows you to better connect with the patient, and you'll see conversions increase by upwards of 20%. You might see time on page increase because people don't just engage with the video, they trust you more, so they're more likely to read the rest of your content. And again, it's just another way to break people's attention up a little bit. I'm gonna scroll through all of the text that you have on your website, especially if I'm on a mobile device, but I'm not going to necessarily pause unless I see something that's easy to digest, and maybe a quick little video. If I click on that, I'd be able to see that. And so, of course, video doesn't just up the stats. If you think about what I said about patient experience, it also improves credibility and usability for the patients using your sites.
Well, once again, Eugene, this is great information. And if I were to sum it up for the audience, start by setting up tracking on your website. Run split tests that allow you to measure the placement of the elements, and be very deliberate about the placement of the various elements like calls to action, video, navigation elements, and so forth.
Yeah, Jeff. Yes, absolutely. Test, test, and test. And as always, great summary. And of course, for our audience, we want to make sure that we're offering very helpful resources. So we'd love to get your feedback. If you enjoyed this video, just send us some information at info@nationalstrategic.com.
Thank you.